it, or they clip them, because it does get kind of gnarly with our sewing machines. Another thing that I've done with a mistake, so let me look at another sample. So there's a Swiss dot. So I have made window treatments, like for kids' rooms, that have cute little dots on it. And I've made like a valance for it for a kid's room or something. And with the light passing through, even with a lining, you can see those floating yarns, and it looks really ugly. So something to consider kind of when you're specifying these fabrics. Just take a look at the back and see how that is. Hold it up to the light, because that is something that I've had in the past as a problem. So next we're going to look at complex weaves woven on the jacquard loom. A jacquard attachment on a loom makes it possible to produce any design, however intricate, since each warp yarn can be controlled separately for each insertion of the weft through automatic control of raising the warp yarns. Jacquard loom is considered the first computer punch card prototype. So I'm going to have you think about an old Victorian piano. And I want you to think about the sheet that has all those little punctures in it. And as that turns, as the sheet turns, it tells the piano which key to go down. So if you've ever seen an old piano, like if you've been to Tombstone and there's nobody playing there, you might have seen kind of this white piece of paper kind of moving right above the piano that's telling the piano which keys to go down. So what happens is each time it hits a certain hole, the key moves down. So that's how these early punch cards used to work. So during industrialization, the jacquard loom just became this, phenomenon, because they could really make these really complicated designs that before were only really reserved for the elite, the aristocracy, the royalty, etc. So the advent of the jacquard loom really changes the textile industry. Today, they don't use a computer punch card or that same kind of punch card that the piano used to use, but rather it's computer generated. So here's just an early example of a complex weave. So this is a tapestry. This is a tapestry from the medieval period. If you're taking your history of interior design courses, you know that it's from the medieval period, because you can see all of these people all clustered together. There's no sense of perspective. They're just kind of stacked on top of each other. It's not until the Renaissance that we start seeing perspective. The mille fleurs, the 1,000 flowers, that's really associated with the middle pieces. So let me just read about early tapestry so that you can appreciate the history and appreciate what we as designers have access to today because of the jacquard loom. So a tapestry is a form of textile art traditionally woven on a vertical loom or on a floor loom. So some of these were so big, my friends, like during the Middle Ages, that they were actually woven on the floor. So if you can imagine like laying out a big carpet, they would just do a section of it, they would roll it up, and then they would do another section of it, and they would roll it up. And if you can imagine the skill that would have been required to do this. It is composed of two sets of interlacing threads, those running parallel to the link called the warp, which you know, and then the weft. The warp, as you know, would be under tension on a loom, and then the weft threads are passed back and forth. Well, that's nothing that you haven't heard of before. But what's different is that these weft yarns are typically discontinuous. The artisan interlaces each colored weft back and forth in its small pattern area. So if I can start down here. So it's woven, right? So here's a little bit of gold, stop, black, stop, gold, stop, black, stop, and there was all different types of ways to interlace these tapestries so that they wouldn't have these big slots or holes everywhere. So they had to, each time they stopped and started a color, they had to actually kind of connect those two so that the weft can continue. So stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, but so that there wasn't holes or gaps everywhere, they either had to sew those together or interlace them somehow. So I just give you a little bit of history because I do come from a history background, but because I think it's just fascinating just to kind of know a little bit about the past. So this is the unicorn. There's that story of the unicorn. This is a contemporary textile based on the traditional unicorn tapestry. In this example, you can see that the unicorn was created with some chenille yarn, so there's some texture in that tapestry. But oftentimes we'll see most tapestries are scenic, floral, images, etc. This is, kind of close to reference 79 in your book, your swatch. This is an example of a tapestry weave. So I have you just look at that. And just take a look at the back of that example and what it must have been like to actually weave this, kind of where red and green start, where colors go together, how they created that shadowing effect with just by hand, just through the weaving process. It's just amazing. So when you look at this example, number 79, just kind of feel the weight with all that start and go and heavier yarns. It's that nice heavy weight. So that's a traditional tapestry. It just happens to be with some chenille yarns, which give it that nice fuzzy surface. Swatch number 80 in your textbook is an example of a damask. And a damask is a fabric that is woven on the jacquard loom. So it's complicated, it's complex. So you might have also heard the term damask as a pattern as well. So it's true, it's both. But let's just talk about the weave. It is woven on the jacquard loom, and what happens is satin damasks create positive, negative patterns by using satin in certain areas and sateen in other. So what they're doing is that direction of kind of how they're floating over goes one direction. So let's just say here in maroon, and the other direction here in like champagne or gold. And the effect is something that is reversible. So this was the best pattern I can find, and I'm going to have you just maybe take a look at swatch number 18. And I don't feel like it's really kind of showing that nice reverse quality quite as well. But what you can see, what is shiny on the front is the background. What's more has the sheen. So what has more of the sheen on the back is the floral. So you can see how it's the mirror or the opposite in that example. This is what the pattern typically looks like. So you've seen these wall coverings. You've seen them as fabrics. They're great for upholstery. If they're lightweight, they can be, they can be worn. They can be draped. They're just exquisite. So that's an example of that weave. And I believe pronounced damask or demain in French. So not the asks. That's more English. This isn't in your book, but I would like you to know what this is. So is traditional patterns very popular right now? The answer is, maybe large scale damask patterns are very popular right now for wall coverings, or if you're doing, I don't know, kind of old Hollywood looks and having fun with that. But the traditional patterns aren't popular right now. But for my 3 students who are listening, in your career, these traditional styles will come back. And so one of these I used a lot when I worked at Ethan Allen as a young designer. They're called an emberline stripe. And those are created when a warp stripe is imposed over a traditional frame damask pattern. So here you can see the floral pattern and then the stripe over it. So very popular in traditional interiors. Brocades are just beautiful. And a brocade, I'm just going to have you look at it for example. It looks like there is a field. That blue, let's say a beautiful piece of blue silk fabric. And it almost looks like the pattern has been embroidered on top of it. But a brocade actually is a woven pattern. And this is a very traditional textile, right? So if you go back to the Renaissance, go to Versailles and beyond, you'll see a lot of these beautiful brocades. So here's what it is. So it is a structure that uses a third element, a set of yarns, in addition to the warp and filling. So there is a third element. It makes it more complex. Again, not a plain basic weave. So yes, there is the warp yarns. Yes, there is the weft yarns. But then there's that third set that's going to be woven through to create the design. So that same floating yarns will be seen on the back side of the fabric. The supplementary weft does not create any stability. Rather, it's just creating this decorative element. So, swatch number 83. Take a look at swatch number 83. I'm a little disappointed with the textbook because this is not, the front absolutely, the front absolutely looks like a brocade. Looks like a beautiful traditional brocade. But do you see that there's none of these really floating yarns on the back? That's not bad. It's just not a true example of what something brocaded looks like on the back. It's just that the technology has gotten so that those 3 sets of yarns can be woven simultaneously so that you limit all those nasty weft yarns in the back. So let's see. So now I'm kind of scratching it. So if you scratch the back with your fingernail, you can kind of see that you're pulling out some of those floating yarns. It would look much different if we looked at a traditional piece on the back. And so what this is called a lampus. And I don't want you to have to remember that, because if your client asks you if a client wants a brocade for their interior, they want something that looks like this. This lovely field with that embroidered, what looks like an embroidered detail on it. Is there any questions? Because I might have got off track, but you don't see those clear floaters along the back. So currently, lampus refers to patterns woven away that simulates traditional brocade patterns but are not true brocade. So that's what you're looking at in swatch number 83. I also feel that swatch 84, I need to change this. Swatch 84 is not a great example of a brocatelle. A brocatelle is essentially the same as a brocade, but heavier and made of spun yarns. For this reason, the fabric is more three-dimensional than a brocade. So if you look closely at swatch 84 in your book, you can kind of see the three-dimension of the design. But it's a little hard to see because of all the chenille yarns, right? Because it has those soft, fuzzy yarns. Most clients who want a brocatelle are looking for something like this. It looks like a brocade or a damask, and but it looks padded. It looks puffy. That's just, it looks puffy. It looks puffy. It has dimension. A lisière is a French brocade with a specific design. This is swatch 85 in your reference. It's a combination of stripes, smaller vine-like detail, and flowers. So very French design. So double weaves are swatch 86 through 89. Double weaves are essentially two fabrics woven together at the same time. So if you look at swatch 86 in your textbook, it's like two fabrics, right? Two separate fabrics. Almost picture like two sets of like two looms right on top of each other. So that there's a set on the top that's weaving and a set on the bottom that's weaving, but it's simultaneous. And so that one on top can actually go down to the one below it and go up to the one above it. And so it's going to look like it's quilted or tufted, but it's not. It's a double weave, right? So it's being woven simultaneously together. So really create these unusual designs, and it creates something called a pocket cloth. So in 87, you can see that it creates these little pocket effects, right, between the two fabrics. So clearly 87 looks like something that was two pieces of fabric that were quilted together, but they're not. It's a double weave. Those same double weaves can create double-sided, completely reversible fabrics. So this is called it's a double weave, but they're often referred to as double cloths. So for my interior designers out there, let me just say these red and yellow and blue and yellow cute little double cloths are very popular with the country French style. Country French, when I was a young designer, was really popular in Arizona. And so we did a lot of these red and yellow interiors and blue and yellow interiors. They were really popular, not even just for model homes, but for residences as well. I loved the country French style. And so we used a lot of this Pierre deux, and we used a lot of this double-faced cloths. So sample 88 and sample 89. So matelassé are areas of single and double cloth that are combined into one. The double areas are usually stuffed on the back with a bulky yarn that never shows on the face. And so the important thing with a matelassé is that it creates this quilted effect. So in your book, swatch, must have been a little tired this morning, swatch 88 and 89. Personally, swatch 88 looks to me like a traditional matelassé that interior designers would use more than swatch 89. Bobby or Linda, have you ever seen a matelassé used on a coverlet before? It really does have this padded effect. And in our textbook, it's calling it a blistered surface. So, you know, I'm not arguing that the French word does mean blistered surface, and so probably 89 truly is a matelassé. I believe that it is. But as an interior designer, what you're looking at on the screen in sample 88 is when a client is asking for a matelassé, that's usually what they're looking for. So when you look at maybe quilts or coverlets at, I'd just be curious, quilts or coverlets at Pottery Barn, they're not always quilted. It could be that they're using a matelassé, so therefore they do not have to quilt it because it already has that nice raised area and kind of that stuffed quilted look. So important to know about those, you will be using these as interior designers. This will come up.